You ever get those letters in the mail? The ones promising, like big lottery wins, or you've got like some psychic telling you your future.
Yo, yeah.
Most of it is just chuck them right in the recycling bin.
Or right into the trash, yeah.
But for a lot of older adults, it can be like the start of a real nightmare.
Absolutely.
So today we're doing a deep dive into this world of mail fraud.
Yeah.
We're going to try and figure out why it's so dangerous, especially for seniors.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about this deep dive is we're looking at an actual study that was based on real scammer records.
Oh, wow.
So these were seized by federal agents. This isn't just like victim reports.
Oh, so we're getting like right into the...
Yeah, we're getting into like the nitty-gritty of
the criminal mind.
the business of scamming.
So this isn't just like a couple of isolated incidents, right?
No.
Yeah.
This study tracked 4 major mail fraud schemes
Wow.
that ran for almost 20 years,
Oh, my God.
from 1999 to 2018.
Okay, so like a significant period.
Yeah, very significant period.
And how many people are we talking about here?
The scale is massive. We're talking over 1.3 million victims.
Wow.
And get this, a total of 11.8 million individual incidents of fraud.
So some people are getting hit multiple times.
Absolutely. That's actually one of the big takeaways from this study.
Really?
Is this repeat victimization.
That's crazy. Okay, so
Yeah.
out of these 1.3 million victims, how old are these people?
Well, that's one of the most concerning findings.
Yeah.
The average age of a first-time victim was 61.
Wow.
Over half of all the victims were over 60 years old.
So we're talking like people's parents, grandparents.
Exactly.
Okay, so are they like specifically being targeted?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
while this study doesn't give us like a definitive answer,
Yeah.
it does point to some things that might make older adults more vulnerable.
Okay, like what?
Things like social isolation. As people get older, they might not have
Right.
the same social networks.
Not as connected.
Exactly. And then also potential cognitive decline.
Yeah, as you get older.
So there are factors there that might make some individuals more susceptible.
So it's not just that they're targeted more, it's the impact too, right?
Exactly. The financial impact is huge.
Yeah.
Because the study found that victims in their 70s and 80s,
Right.
while they make up a smaller percentage of the total victims,
Right.
they actually account for almost 30% of the total money loss.
Oh, wow. So they're being hit harder,
They're getting hit much harder.
even though there's less of them?
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yeah, think about your own parents or grandparents.
Oh, my goodness.
Losing thousands of dollars money they've worked their entire lives for to these schemes.
It's just awful.
It's heartbreaking.
So are these scammers like actively seeking out older people?
I mean, that's a really disturbing thought.
Yeah.
But there is evidence in this data that kind of points in that direction.
Really?
Yeah, the study suggests that these scammers might actually be sharing lists of victims.
Oh, so once you're on the hook, you're
You're on the hook.
done.
Meaning, if someone falls prey to a scam, they're more likely to be targeted again and again.
So you said this repeat victim thing, that was a big take.
Oh, yeah, a huge takeaway.
Like how often are people getting scammed?
We'll get this. 62% of victims
Right.
were scammed more than once,
That's crazy.
averaging about 9 incidents each.
9.
9 times.
Oh my God.
And the people who were scammed over 20 times,
Over 20.
they lost, on average, $1,771.
Wow.
I mean, that's someone's rent. That's medical bills.
That's people's life saving.
It's a big chunk of their life savings just gone.
And the more times they're scammed, the faster it happens again.
That's exactly what this study found. The more times someone was scammed, the quicker the next scam would show up in their mailbox.
It's like they're just waiting.
For those scammed over 20 times, the average time between scams was just 20 days.
Oh my gosh.
So it really highlights how predatory this whole thing is.
Yeah, it's not random.
These aren't just random acts. These scammers are actively and repeatedly targeting individuals that they think are susceptible to their tactics.
So one last thing that I thought was interesting in this study,
Yeah.
it said that March was the peak month for these scams.
Interesting. Right.
Do you think that has anything to do with like tax season?
Yeah. It makes you wonder if there's a connection to tax season or if people are just
More vulnerable.
more financially vulnerable around that time of year.
Stressed out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So while the study doesn't actually explain the reason for that trend,
Right.
it does show how calculated these operations can be.
They know what they're doing.
They're capitalizing on specific times of year
Yeah.
when people might be more stressed,
Right.
more susceptible to those financial pressures.
So we've seen how widespread these scams are,
Mm.
how they specifically target older adults
Right.
and how they often lead to people getting victimized over and over again.
Absolutely. And it's really disturbing.
So what can we do about it?
That's the million-dollar question.
Okay, so we've seen just how widespread these scams are
Yeah.
and how they really seem to target older adults. But it's not enough to just know the numbers, right?
No, absolutely not.
We have to figure out, like, why these scams work in the first place.
Right. You've got to get into the psychology of it.
Yeah, like what makes them so persuasive?
Exactly. Because if we can understand that, then maybe we can start to, like, combat them more effectively.
So it's more than just saying, like, oh, someone was gullible or naive.
Way more than that.
Okay.
It's this really complex interplay of psychological factors that these scammers, they know exactly how to exploit them.
Oh, wow.
They understand what people desire, what they hope for, what they're afraid of, and they use all of that to manipulate their victims.
It's kind of like brainwashing almost.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's brainwashing in the literal sense, but
Yeah.
but there are some interesting parallels in the way that, scammers will use these psychological techniques
Right.
to kind of influence your decision making.
Okay, so what are some of the things that they do?
Well, one very common tactic is to create a sense of urgency or scarcity.
Oh, like those limited time offers you see everywhere.
Exactly, like you have to act now or you're going to miss out on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Right, right.
And this preys on our fear of missing out, that like FOMO everybody talks about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it can lead people to making decisions without really thinking things through.
I could see how that would be really effective if the offer itself sounds too good to be true.
Exactly.
Like you get so excited you don't even stop to think if it's actually real.
That's exactly how they hook you in.
Wow. Okay, so what else do they do?
Another big technique is building trust and rapport.
Okay.
So they might use flattery, compliments, even sharing personal stories.
Oh, to make you feel like you know them?
Exactly, to try and create a connection to make them seem more relatable.
Because they're not just selling you a product or a service.
Yeah.
They're selling you a person.
They're selling themselves as someone that you can trust. Because they know that people are more likely to trust someone they feel connected to.
Right.
Even if that connection is completely made up.
So once they've got you, then they can kind of get you to do whatever they want.
Pretty much, yeah. Once that trust is established, it's much easier to persuade someone to, like, give them money or whatever they're after.
So these scammers are like con artists, basically.
In a lot of ways, yeah. They're masters of creating illusions, manipulating your perceptions to get what they want.
That's scary. Okay, so what about the people who get scammed multiple times?
They're repeat victims.
Yeah. Like, why would someone fall for the same scam over and over?
Right. It seems like you'd learn your lesson the first time.
You'd think so, right?
Well, it's rarely just one thing.
Okay.
It's usually a combination of factors.
Like what?
Cognitive decline might play a role for some people, making them more susceptible to those persuasive tactics.
Right.
Social isolation is another big one.
Okay, yeah.
Because people who are lonely, they might be more willing to believe someone offering them attention friendship.
Right, even if it's fake.
Even if it's not genuine, yeah.
So they're just looking for a connection, and these scammers take advantage of that.
Exactly. And then there's this thing called the sunk cost fallacy that might come into play.
The sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah, have you ever heard of that?
I don't think so.
Okay, so imagine you've put a lot of time and effort into something,
Yeah.
a project, let's say, and it's clearly not working out.
Okay.
But instead of just cutting your losses, you keep putting more and more into it because you've already invested so much.
Right, you don't want to give up.
Exactly. You don't want to admit defeat, so you keep throwing good money after bad.
Oh, so are you saying these people who are getting scammed multiple times are like, oh, I've already lost so much, I got to keep going to try and win it back?
Exactly. They might think like, oh, if I just send a little bit more, maybe this time it'll work out.
Oh, wow.
So it's this really powerful bias that these scammers can really prey on.
So they're trapped.
They're trapped in this cycle of hope and desperation.
It's just awful to think that these scammers are like intentionally targeting people who are already vulnerable.
I know. It's heartbreaking.
Especially older adults who are dealing with, maybe social isolation or cognitive decline.
It's really disheartening, but the thing is, if we understand these tactics,
Yeah.
then that's a step towards protecting ourselves and the people we care about.
So knowing the stats is important.
Yeah.
But it's just as important to understand, like, how these scams actually work.
Exactly how they operate on a psychological level.
Oh, okay, so in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to talk about what we can actually do about all this, right?
Absolutely. We're going to get into some concrete steps that we can take to protect ourselves and our loved ones from becoming victims of these schemes.
So we're back, and, we've been talking about, this really disturbing world of mail fraud. and how it like disproportionately targets older adults
Right.
and like the psychology behind how these scams actually work.
Yeah, all those tricky tactics.
Yeah. So now let's like shift gears a little bit and talk about like what can we actually do about this?
Right, because that's the important part, right?
Yeah, like what are some concrete steps that we can take to protect ourselves and, our families?
Well, I think knowledge is really power in this situation. The more we understand these scams, the better we'll be at fighting back.
Okay, so let's say I'm worried about my grandma. She loves getting those sweepstakes mailers.
Oh, yeah, those are classic.
Like, what are some red flags that I should be looking for?
Okay, well, first off, be wary of any mail you get that you didn't ask for that promises, huge winnings or like guaranteed solutions.
Okay.
Especially if they ask for money up front.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
If you've already won
I'm
something, you shouldn't have to pay to claim your prize, right?
Exactly. Okay, so what else?
Watch out for those high-pressure tactics.
Okay.
Those phrases like act now, limited time, offer, secret system.
Right.
Like all that stuff is designed to create that sense of urgency, and it kind of like bypasses your rational thinking.
So just slow down, read everything carefully.
Exactly.
And if it sounds too good to be true,
It probably is.
it probably is. Yeah. Okay, so how do we actually talk to our older relatives about this?
Yeah, that's a really important point because you don't want to...
You don't want to be like
Yeah, you don't want to make them feel...
judged.
Yeah, or patronized or anything.
Yeah.
So approach it with empathy and understanding.
Yeah.
Remember, a lot of times victims of these scams feel ashamed. They feel embarrassed.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So you want to create a safe space for open communication.
So instead of saying like, oh, grandma, how could you fall for that?
Right.
Maybe say something like, what was it about this that made you interested?
Exactly. Yeah, try to understand, what caught their attention.
Yeah.
And then you can help them understand the tricks, like we've been talking about.
Right, like the urgency thing and like the building rapport.
Exactly. So they can recognize those tactics if they see them again.
Okay, so what about resources? Like, are there organizations out there that can help?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So the National Council on Aging, they have a great website with a ton of information and advice.
Okay.
And then the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, they have a hotline specifically for reporting scams and getting support.
Okay, that's good to know that there's help out there.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so beyond just like individual action, though,
Yeah.
is there anything that could be done on a larger scale?
I mean, systemically, yeah, for sure.
Like to combat this whole problem?
Well, we need stricter laws,
Yeah.
right? And we need better enforcement to hold these scammers accountable.
Yeah, put them in jail.
Exactly. And then increased funding for adult protective services is crucial.
Right.
And we need better training for law enforcement so they can recognize and address elder financial abuse.
I feel like education is a big part of it, too.
Oh, huge. Yeah,
Like reaching older adults through, community centers or
absolutely.
senior groups.
Yeah,
Maybe even banks and financial institutions could play a role.
totally, because it's all about building this culture of vigilance and protection. We need to talk about this stuff openly and honestly, not pretend it's not happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So where do we go from here? Like, what should our listeners take away from all of this?
Well, I think the big takeaway is that awareness is our first and strongest line of defense.
Right.
It means having those conversations, even though they might be tough sometimes with our loved ones.
Right.
It means advocating for stronger protections and supporting those organizations that are out there fighting this every day.
Well, this deep dive has been really eye-opening.
It's been a journey.
It has, we've gone from those like really shocking statistics to the psychology of these scams
You actually work
to, actual things that we can do to protect ourselves.
and to make a difference.
And to make a difference.
Exactly.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of mail fraud. And remember,